I thought it might be fun to talk a little more about the reference images that I use, some of the resources that I typically go to get images that I paint from. Now, I've talked about this a little bit in a previous video that's kind of an older video, so I thought it might be useful to update that with kind of the latest resources that I use, pros and cons of each one, and talk a little more thoroughly about it. So I'm going to throw an example of each type on screen as I talk about it, and I'll present these kind of in the order of most used to least used. Now, I know most used to least used because I actually keep a spreadsheet of my paintings, and I just updated it, so I saw these fresh percentage numbers, and I thought, okay, well, that might be useful to present some of this stuff. So I'll start with the most used type for me. That is 32% of my paintings. That is free stock photo images. So I'm talking about the royalty-free stock photo sites like Unsplash and Pexels, and there's a handful of other ones that are out there that they're photography sites. Users submit photos to them, and the condition is that you can use them for free to create derivative works from them. You can, if you want to make t-shirts or stickers, or if you want to paint from them and use those as a reference, you can do that. That's the huge pro of these. The painting that I have on screen right now is from one of those sites. I think this one is from Unsplash, probably. Actually, maybe it's from Pexels. I can't remember. I use both. I've downloaded quite a few images from both of those sites. But the huge pro is that they're free and commercial use is allowed from these images. So I am free as a painter and a portrait artist to reference those photos, and I can just paint directly from them. And if I want to sell that painting, I'm free to do that based on the terms and conditions. So another pro is that if you find a photographer that you really like, it's super easy to use different poses of the same subject, of the same model that photographer is taking photos of. So you can find a whole batch of really great references that way. One of the cons, though, is that searching these sites is kind of imprecise. You have to browse, like you can put some basic search terms in and browse through the lists of photos, but it does take time to kind of browse through. And the selection is what it is. It might be kind of limited. So you can find some good stuff, but it does take an investment of time to search through it. Another con is that some of these sites are starting to have premium photo selections. An anecdote is that I found some photos that I really liked and wanted to use a reference, but when I clicked on them, I realized they were premium and I had to pay to use them. So, the sites need to they need to pay for server space too, so I get it, but that is kind of a con. So, but all that being said, this is still my most used reference photo type. So it's pretty good. It's an option that I really like, and I've really leaned pretty heavily on historically. So the next type that I want to talk about is my second most commonly used reference image resource, which is rapidly catching up to those free stock images. It's AI generated images. This is obviously a pretty new and booming topic. There are a lot of AI generation sites now. Many are free, or you can have a certain number of uses for free. My favorite one right now is Microsoft's AI image generator. You can use it through Bing for free. I think you get 15 image generations per day or something like that are like pretty quick. Then they put a time delay on them a little bit. Microsoft's Bing AI image generator uses OpenAI's, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's DALL-E, DALL-E, I think is how you say it. It's pretty good. You can put pretty complex prompts, the gamut of what type of reference image you want. Like, I want an old man sitting by a river, photography, reference photo, figure study, and if the images that they're giving you have, like, the guy's wearing a hat, you can say no hat. legs crossed, relaxed pose, nature scene background. Like, you can add a bunch of detail to your prompt. So it gives you a lot of control over your reference photos. There are a lot of these available right now. Google actually has one through their Bard system that they just allowed, like, text to image prompts. I think that's a relatively new feature. And they also have, Google has Image FX that's available. Those I don't like as much. They work, but there's some limitations to the prompts. They can't be it doesn't seem like they can be as complex as the Bing DALL-E one. You also can't really get into, like, tell me something in a certain style. It won't let you do that, at least not right now. So again, you type a prompt of what you want and it spits out an image, and that specificity is a huge pro. You can generate a lot of results that way. So I've actually been using this quite a lot lately. I imagine at this pace, eventually the AI reference image photos, which I'm not sure if I mentioned, 30% of my paintings have been with AI reference photos. I imagine that's going to pass the free stock images at some point. So pros and cons: like, unlimited reference photos of whatever you like, and you can refine it however you like. So there's a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility in there. And it's also not a real person, so there's no model release for these images, which is nice. However, what does the future hold for the legal side of AI? I have no idea. I'm not an attorney. I really feel like a lot of this is unsettled. So no, the images you're generating are not real people, but the AI model was trained on real images, and we don't know what real images it was trained on. Is it thousands of images? Is it millions of images? I think the big ones are probably millions of images, but if this is an aggregate, how's the aggregate built? I don't know. I have no clue. So I feel like a lot of this is still pretty unsettled. Painting from a reference like this feels to me like a wild frontier a little bit, which is exciting, but kind of a big question mark too. There are lots of pros. I really have enjoyed creating these AI reference photos and painting from them. It's really nice, but who knows what the end of that looks like. Kind of another con though too is these things are not yet perfect at human anatomy. They're getting a lot better, but I have definitely gotten reference images where I'm like, that one is pretty decent, but it's not going to work. And I've had to scrap a lot of them because of kind of bizarre, like, they're not great at fingers still. Some figure positions are not great also. So there's some pros and cons for sure. The next type that I wanted to talk about is self-created reference images. So this is, I think it's the third one for me. So it's at 12% self-created. 12% of my paintings have been from self-created references. And by self-created, typically for me, what that means is I literally took a photo with a camera myself. I would call this probably the most old school approach. I think it could also include, though, painting from life. I'd probably lump that into this category. That is not something that I've really done. I would really like to, but so eventually that might be in my future. I hope it is. But you created this scene, so you're safe to make art from it. It's probably the safest in terms of rights and permissions. Airtight as far as usage for derivative work or commercial use, because you took the photo. With an asterisk, as long as you have release or permission from the model in the photo. So you legally can't just go around snapping photos of strangers and then saying, all right, I can use this for commercial purposes now. You definitely have to have release from your subject as well to use their likeness. If you have that aspect of it locked down, you can use this extensively. There are cons though. It's certainly more time consuming. You have to set everything up. You may have to schedule a date or time with the portrait model that you're going to use. You actually have to worry about taking good photos. So that also means you have to worry about having good lighting, which I have found over the course of the last year and a half or so, good lighting is absolutely vital. That's a huge pro for the royalty-free stock images and for the AI. Both of those things, great lighting in most of the photos, which is actually kind of surprising about the AI one, but great lighting. It's easy to paint from. Photos that I take myself, because I'm not a professional photographer, sometimes the lighting is not what I needed. I actually found that out when I paid a couple of models, just people that live in my neighborhood actually, that were willing to do it. We just went to a park and I took some photos and letting them know that I was going to use these as references in paintings. And it was a great experience and a lot of fun, but I did not take great photos. The lighting was not the best. So it was great doing that, I think limited by my photography skills. So that's kind of a problem. So another con potentially is that you have to pay the model, which adds an additional expense to it. So a lot of the things that I've used the most that I've mentioned already, those things are largely free. Paying a model obviously is not. So it's cool to do, but yeah, it adds expense. It adds some additional skill and setup that perhaps you were not ready for. I know that I'm often not ready for that. So self-created has been useful to me. Obviously, I've done quite a few of those, but there's a reason why it's 12% instead of 32% or whatever. Okay, so I'm realizing now as I'm moving to the next category that I am actually doing these out of order. The next one that I want to talk about is actually subject-provided images. Now, this is only 6% or so of my of the paintings that I've done. It actually makes sense to put it here next to the self-created category because there are kind of a lot of similarities to it. In this category, the subject provided, this is basically someone wants a portrait from you and they give you photos for it. It's relatively easy. That's a huge pro. As long as the photos are good, the barrier for entry is low. Someone has already taken photos, they give them to you and you paint what's in the photo. So that's nice. Another nice thing is they may even pay you a commission for it. So money is flowing your way as opposed to the previous situation with self-created reference images. So that's good. A con though to this is at this point, if you have a client, you have to worry about how they feel about the result. So that's a whole different experience. And you also don't have control over the photo quality. So lighting, as I mentioned, is extremely important, but if you didn't take the photo and you don't have access to the subject of the photo, if the photo is bad, it might be a struggle. So you have to navigate that difficulty. You also have to make sure that you have permission from the person who originally took the photo and the subject of the photo if you want to use it anywhere else. So one thing that comes to mind for me is if I want to write another book someday, I may not have explicit permission to use some of these subject-provided paintings. So it's only 6% of the paintings that I've done, but 6% of 200 almost paintings is, that's a handful. There are going to be some there that I'll have to hunt down and make sure that I can actually publish. So those things may not be completely clear unless you push in the moment, which I never remember to do. So there's a con, but I thought it might make sense to talk about the subject provided and the self-created together since there is kind of an interplay between those conversations. So the next category that I want to talk about, I sort of leaped around a little bit, but this one is actually the third most. I think I misspoke earlier when I said self-created was third. This one, images with a copyright. This is my third most. It's 14%. Now, that 14% I feel like is a little deceptive because early when I started painting, I certainly did a lot more of these images that held a copyright just because it's fun to paint stuff that's like fan art or something that's like an actor that you like or a musician that you like. So I did a lot more of these early when I first started painting. That has tapered off significantly though. I really do very few of these now because at this point, now that I've gotten a little better at painting, I want to create paintings that I can sell. So I kind of want to get away from these. And I really do think overall it might be the worst choice because there's just not much you can do with it. So pro, obviously it's fun to paint famous people or characters that you're a fan of. But cons, really it can only be for the enjoyment since you don't have the right to profit from their likeness or intellectual property. I guess I have to put an asterisk on that though, because I know that some people do that, and you know that's their prerogative to dive into it if they want to, but I tend to be cautious with stuff like that. So for me, it's really just it just has to be for the fun of it. As I mentioned, that was kind of a large part of the early painting experience for me. So it's a decent piece of the pie right now, but that percentage continues to drop as I go because I've really used a lot less of those. The last category that I want to mention is my lowest, which is unknown. There are a few that I can't remember or I don't know where they came from. I had them saved on my phone or on my computer or iPad, and I just held on to them for a long time. I thought they were interesting and I wanted to paint them, but I don't remember where they came from. So essentially what I do with these, it's 4% of my paintings, so not huge, but it's a few. But since I don't remember where they came from, I have to treat these images just like the copyright category. I don't know, so I have to treat them that way. Just because, again, I like to be cautious. So that is all I have for this conversation on reference images. I hope it was useful. I know that sometimes it's hard to find references. That's probably an artist's struggle that's kind of universal for everyone, is trying to find those. You can lean on painting your friends and painting your family to some extent, but at some point, got to find other references. So that's all I have. I'd love to hear from other people on this topic. If you have other resources that you use that I haven't covered here that you think would be interesting, I'd love to check them out. I'm sure other people would love to hear about them as well. And let me know if you use any of the ones that I talked about here, which ones are your favorites. I'd love to hear that too. So thank you for watching this. I hope to see you for the next video.